Mort Klein is the head muckety-muck over there at ZOA, Zionist Organization of America, the oldest real Jewish organization in America. It is a North Star, I would argue, for the domestic Jewish community as well as many in Israel. And its mission is essentially to help protect and promote the Jewish state. That's what Zionism really is, where the Jews have their own state. It's not a curse word like the left wants you to believe. And we're talking about an indigenous people in a part of the world that they really have the right to lay claim to, even though everybody else seems to think that somebody else has the right to lay claim to it. Mort Klein, how are you, my friend?
Well, physically all right. Emotionally, it's been a nightmare for myself and so many other people, but it's a privilege to be speaking with Mark Levin, a national resource who promotes truth, integrity, and patriotism. You're a very special American.
Thank you, Mort. And Mort is a tremendous patriot. Just quickly, Mort, tell people a little bit about your background and your parents' background.
Well, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. My parents survived Auschwitz. I was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany and lost virtually my entire family. Grew up without grandparents. Virtually all my aunts and uncles, cousins were murdered by the German Nazi Adolf Hitler. And then I went into mathematics. I did medical research with the great two-time Nobel Prize-winning chemist Linus Pauling. And when my wife started complaining regularly that I'm not doing anything for Israel, the Jewish people, I started reading up and started writing, and then I was asked to run for president of ZOA, which I did, and I've been president for 30 years.
Well, with that background and that context, how would you characterize what's taken place in Israel, what's taking place now, and Joe Biden's involvement?
This is the worst massacre of Jews, maybe of anyone, since the Holocaust. You can really compare this to the Nazis, and it's even worse in some sense. The Nazis tried to hide their barbarism. They were ashamed of it, really. And yet Hamas, the Muslim Arab terrorist group, put out videos. And Biden has been the worst president for the Jewish state of Israel we've ever had. One of the reasons for that is behind the scenes, Barack Hussein Obama and George Soros, now son Alex, are involved in promoting their policies. And Biden is listening to them and fulfilling them. That's why he has been not appeasing Iran, where he's given them $16 billion in the last several weeks and ignored all sanctions, where Iran has earned another $50 billion to promote terrorism. So he's not appeasing by doing this. He's strengthening Iran intentionally. This is a horrible thought, but that's the truth. And one of the reasons I know this is true is almost everyone he's appointed to positions that deal with Iran or Israel are friends of Obama who've been awful. Robert Malley, the liaison to Iran, is pro-Hamas, against sanctions, pro-Iran in every way. Hedi Amar, the liaison to Israel, has praised the Intifada, the terror war against Jews, supports boycotting Israel. Mahir Bitar, the head of intelligence, was the national head of Students for Justice in Palestine, a vicious anti-Semitic, anti-Israel group. And even Anthony Blinken. Anthony Blinken has praised radical anti-Israel groups publicly, has spoken at their conferences, and has praised radical Arabs who hate Israel and Jews, has praised them publicly. And so that's how I know that Obama is involved. And one of the reasons he has these awful policies against Israel is because look at the advisors he has around him. Besides Obama and Soros, he has these people and more that are telling him, advising him to do just horrific things against the Jewish state of Israel, even when they're fighting against a Hamas Arab Nazi group. They're still pressuring Israel. And I'll tell you, this hostages business, the business of humanitarian aid, Israel and Biden should say, we will give you aid if you release the 200 hostages. It's very simple. If Hamas cares about their own Gaza Arabs, they would release the hostages in order to get aid. If they don't, that means it's clear that Hamas doesn't care about hostages. I also might say this is a war, and it's not even against the country. It's against the Hamas terrorist regime. And in any war, do you do something against the civilians there? Do we do anything for the Vietnam civilians, for the Iraqi civilians, for the German civilians? No, it is a war. And yet, strangely enough, when it's Israel fighting Hamas Nazis, we want to aid the civilians. And I must add, the civilians are not innocent. Their own polls, Mark, show 68 to 87% in various polls support murdering Jews. Yes, 68 to 87%. 95% are opposed to Israel's existence. They voted Hamas into office. Right now, their polls show overwhelming support for Hamas. And there's not been a single voice in Gaza condemning Hamas. Not a single voice, not a religious voice, not a civilian voice. So these are not innocent civilians.
But I even hear, not just from our media, but people who used to serve in high places, and dealing with Israel and dealing with the Middle East, they all say the same thing. It's like in order to continue a discussion, you got to say, well, Hamas doesn't represent all Palestinians. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of riots and a lot of protests going on right now. They're not talking about a two-state solution. They're talking about a final solution, and they're also protesting on behalf of Hamas, not peaceful Palestinians who love the Jews.
No, unfortunately, the Hamas charter calls for the murder of every Jew in the world. It's in their charter. And the Gaza Arabs supported Hamas despite that charter. They support this. They represent the majority of Arabs in Gaza. And the same with the Palestinian Authority. Abbas, he has a Fatah charter. His party's charter calls for the destruction of Israel, an armed struggle against Israel, meaning killing Jews. So these people have really supported the Gaza Arabs. So it's not accurate to say they don't represent all Arabs. Look, no leader of a country or an area represents all the people, but Hamas represents the vast majority of the Gaza Arabs. That has to be made clear.
But this whole discussion is nuts, because you look at World War II, a war that we wanted to win. You look at Germany, and I don't remember the media back then, and I don't remember FDR, the other Harry Truman, later saying, well, look, Hitler doesn't represent all Germans. We didn't give a damn one way or the other. We needed to defeat that country, period. And it didn't matter. We weren't taking polls to make determinations. We wanted to survive. They were part of the Axis powers that joined in with Japan and, of course, Italy. We were attacked by Japan. They declared war on us. That is Germany. And we had to defeat them. And so it wasn't like, are we making sure they have enough nourishment? Did we turn on the water? Did we turn on the electricity? Are we making sure that, it's insane. We can't even win wars anymore.
We bombed Dresden in World War II. We dropped 2 atomic bombs. We didn't ask, do the vast majority of the people support the regime in Japan or in Germany? We knew we had to do everything to crush that regime, that military might. And that's all that mattered. We weren't looking at anything else. Only when it comes to Jews and the Jewish state do we look for excuses why not to use full force to destroy the enemy. Colin Powell, when we went into Iraq, said we will use enormous force, whatever it takes, to crush them. He didn't talk about proportionality. He said we're going to crush them. He didn't talk about whether the Iraqi people were with them or not. The Iraqi regime was a problem, and in their estimation at the time, we had to crush them. Why is it different when it comes to the Jewish state fighting one of the most evil regimes in the history of humankind? And by the way, let me say, you mentioned Democratic Party. Do you know, I don't know if people know this, Rashida Tlaib, who today condemned Israel for that hospital bombing, which now we know it was not Israel, it was the Palestinians. He, in this past year, praised Rashida Tlaib, an overt anti-Semite and hater of America. He said this, I have the exact quote, "I admire, Rashida, your intellect. I admire your passion. I admire your concern for so many other people. From my heart, I pray for you. You're a fighter, God, thank you for being such a great fighter. He praises an overt anti-Semite, and he says similar things about Ilhan Omar, another overt anti-Semite. And the leadership of the Democratic Party has never condemned them in any significant way publicly, censured them. She should be thrown off of every single committee and censured. None of that's happened. Where is Chuck Schumer? Where is Steny Hoyer and the leadership of the Democrats condemning Tlaib with all their power for condemning Israel falsely from the floor this very afternoon?
Mark Klein of ZOA. Isn't Chuck Schumer Jewish, or at least he claims to be?
He was born Jewish. And even his wife is Jewish, I might add.
and he never criticizes these people ever. If it's a Trump supporter, boy, he's got, he's foaming at the mouth, MAGA, and he's. But if it's a Hamas supporter in his own ranks, the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party, I've been saying, silence. Absolutely. You haven't heard anything from him, have you?
When Chuck Schumer speaks to Jewish groups, he says, "My name is Schumer." That's Shomer in Hebrew, which means guardian. He said, "I am Chuck Shomer, the guardian of Israel and the Jewish people." He hasn't acted that way at all.
Mm-hmm. And there he is.
Let me tell you something else that no one knows. Do you know the Palestinian Authority this week gave $3 million handed out to the Hamas terrorists who have murdered Jews? They have paid them to murder Jewish people. This is part of the Pay for Slay program. It has not been written about. They have spent $3 million this week giving lifetime pensions to the Hamas terrorists or their families if the terrorists have died. People have to understand it. And so giving $100 million that Biden has given to the Palestinian Authority the last couple of days, it's simply going to help being used to pay murdering Israelis and Americans. Many Americans have been murdered as well. It's a disgrace to give any money to the Palestinian Authority.
Why do we subsidize our enemies? I mean, Abbas was behind the Munich terrorist slaughter against the Jewish athletes there. He funded it. He strategized it. And they call him a moderate? A guy we can work with? He's a thug. He's a mobster. He keeps all the money for himself and his family and his consiglieres over there at the Palestinian Authority. The UN knows it. Europe knows it. Biden knows it. We all know it. But they play these games with these people, and people die as a result of this, mostly Israelis, no?
Yes, it's 100% true. And they've asked Abbas this week, please condemn Hamas. They asked Abbas. He refused. Finally, he said, I mourn the civilians on each side that have died. That's all he would say. He will not condemn Hamas.
Well, Mort Klein,
we fund him, by the way, $800 million a year. The U.S. government gives to Abbas and the Palestinian Authority. We have to stop that money. They're simply a terrorist regime paying Arab terrorists to murder Jews and Americans.
And we had stopped it, and peace was breaking out all over the place, and then comes in, bonehead, Biden. Mark Klein, I want to thank you for everything you do at ZOA. So if people want to find out more about ZOA, where do they go?
Go to ZOA.org, ZOA.org. You'll learn about many of the things I just said with you today, and many, many other things. We put out several press releases a week, and you can learn a lot about the Arab-Islamic war against Israel and the West.
Yeah, you defend the United States all the time, too. I want people to understand. So check that out, folks. You're going to learn a lot. You'll have a lot of information. God bless you, my friend, Mort Klein. ZOA is a great man, just terrific. He's a fighter.